Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for another installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame series Before the Snap. We hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving break, spent off of school, work. Hopefully, we're able to spend some quality time with your family. We're happy to be back in session here on Friday, and we're looking forward to another great program here today. If you've never tuned in before and this is your first time, you're going to learn all about what it takes to have a career in and around the NFL. And today, we're lucky enough to have a guest that's been in and around all kinds of sports throughout her illustrious career in the media world. So we're going to be able to hear a lot of cool insight here today. If you've tuned in with us before, again, thank you so much. You guys are in store for another excellent program. As always, my name is Jake Ray. I'm the Youth and Education Manager here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I'm all by myself today. No Nathan, no Jerry. Jerry's out at a great event talking to some local middle schoolers about careers. Some of the same stuff we're going to be talking about today. Nathan just had his first baby, so congrats to him and his wife. We wish them the best, and little Elisha as well. So just me today, so you're going to be stuck hearing my voice the entire time, so sorry for all that. But before we get started, a little bit about us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where it's our mission to honor the greatest of the game, to preserve its history, promote its values, and to celebrate excellence together. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, honesty, all of which made our Hall of Famers great football players, but it made them great men off the field as well. It made them great members of their community, fathers, sons, brothers, husbands, whatever it might be. And truly, these values can make you a great employee in any organization that you're in as well. And you'll hear these values come up periodically through our discussion here today. Before we do get started, some thank yous I'd like to pass out. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our teachers, administrators, professors, educators, anybody that shared this program with their students today, and either are watching us live or watching us 6 months from now. We want to just thank you for allowing us to be a small part of your students' learning experience. Secondly, I'd like to thank all of our students tuning in. As always, this program is here for you. This program is here for you to ask questions, begin your networking journey, and learn what it takes to have a career in and around the sport that you love. Specifically today, we're going to be focusing on the game of football because we are the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So thank you so much to all of our students who are tuning in today, as well as down the road. For everybody who is tuning in today, you know the drill. The opportunity here is for you to ask questions. We have some questions ready to go, but we want to hear from you. So as always, if you are watching the program today and you have a question, put it in the chat. First and foremost, let us know what school you're watching from, so we see how many schools we get involved here today. Even if you don't have a question, let us know what school you go to. But if you do have a question, let us know your name, the school you go to, and your question. And periodically, I've got my laptop here in front of me looking at the live chat to see how many of those great questions we have come rolling in today. So as always, get them in, get them early. We want to have the most time we can to get all those questions in as part of the program. So get those questions in for us. So today we are lucky and truly grateful to be joined by Ms. Linda Cohn, who is a Hall of Fame sportscaster, has served as a SportsCenter anchor since joining ESPN in 1992. She's ESPN's longest tenured anchor, and in early 2016 was recognized for anchoring her 5,000th SportsCenter episode, the most of any anchor in ESPN history. In 2017, she was inducted into the National Sports Media Association Hall of Fame and serves as the in-arena host reporter for NHL game coverage, often reporting from between the benches. And if we watch hockey, we know how tense that middle spot in between those two benches can get. She's also the primary host of In the Crease, a nightly hockey program on ESPN+, which began during the 2018 Stanley Cup playoffs. She's also a podcast host and analyst, appearing on multiple Sirius XM channels. She's done it all at ESPN, covering every sport you can think of, including a live broadcast for a tryout as an NHL goalie. She's an author, anchor, writer, radio host, and she received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications from SUNY at Oswego. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Linda Cohn to Before the Snap. Linda, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Great intro. Too long. Usually I'd say, let's just cut to the chase, Jake. It's all good. But, it's really great to be on a platform like this. We talked before we got rolling on this. These are the kind of venues I like doing, talking to young people, finding out what's on their mind, how they can get an edge on others. I like sharing that expertise. That's important to me. And that's always been important to me throughout my 30 plus years at ESPN, is like, helping people, making an impact. And when I hear all the feedback from young people along the way who grew up with me, Before they got the bus for kindergarten, they were watching me, probably you too, Jake, watching the SportsCenter as the wheel used to go round and round 8 times in the morning, and see the same show over and over again. And especially also for young women out there who are in the field now, who've always come up to me, and actually women of all ages come up to me and said, if it wasn't for you sitting in that chair and seeing that a woman could do what a man can do, I'd never, ever, ever would have the courage to get into this field to cover sports. And the reason why I got into it, Jake, is simple. I'm like all you guys. I'm a fan first. I love sports. My dad passed that on to me, and it's a torch that I will continue and have carried. And I don't think that light will dim, not ready to dim just yet.
Awesome. And, normally with this program, I like to dive right in and talk a little bit about, what your day-to-day life looks like. But I want to kind of dive a little further into, that impact you have as a woman who's in that man's world, the sports world, and doing it way before a lot of other people have done it. So what is it like for you to, to kind of take that step forward when you first started, but now to look back on it and have other women in the industry come up to you and say, hey, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be where I am, so what's kind of the twofold, taking that first step and then being on the reverse end of that, having people come up to you and saying what an inspiration you were.
Yeah, you know what? I felt I had nothing to lose. I was just following my passion back then. And even before I got to ESPN, I had to create, that opportunity. And I created that opportunity. And that's the message I always give to young people who perhaps are watching us right now and listening, is the fact you have to do that. My first job out of college at SUNY Oswego was, first broadcasting job was doing news updates, but I always loved sports. People would say to me, God, Linda, when you do those radio news updates, you kind of perk up when you do the scores from the local teams. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's because I really love it. And obviously don't care about giving news, just care about sports. And so I asked the news director to volunteer. I volunteered to cover New York Islander hockey games. My first radio station that I worked at was on Long Island, because that's where I grew up. And, that back then in the early 80s, the Islanders were the thing. They won 4 straight Stanley Cups. And so it was kind of a big deal on Long Island. So I volunteered. I said, if you cover for my gas money, we're good to go. So I filed reports from the Nassau Coliseum where the Islanders used to play. And long story short, others in hiring positions saw like, oh, who's this woman, who's like nuts about, sports and is handling herself in a professional manner and blah, blah, blah. And that's what I mean about putting yourself in a position to get a break. It's really so significant. And even so many years later, the same message holds true. I mean, there are different ways. I mean, look at you and look at this great platform. We have YouTube, we have social media. There are so many ways where you can get your face out there, your voice out there. Back in my day, I mean, I had to bake chocolate chip cookies for someone in editing to put together a tape for me that I could send out to other places. That's how I got my first TV job in Seattle, Washington at KIRO TV in Seattle, because I had to bake chocolate chip cookies for this person in editing that could take a make-believe sportscast that I did for a local Long Island TV program, Channel 55. They put that together for me, and I sent that tape out to cities that I'd like to work in, and Seattle was one of them. And, it clicked a year later. So those are a few examples of how, you have nothing to lose. You might as well go for it now. You can always do your plan B, plan C, plan D job.
Absolutely. So let's just dive into that. Obviously in the media world, the day-to-day life has to look a lot different, day in and day out. It's not, coming in, talking about the same thing, doing the same thing, whether you're working in community relations or public relations and handling kind of the same stuff on a day-to-day. So the best you can, kind of what does your day-to-day life look like with the stuff you're currently handling over there at ESPN?
Yeah, boy, it's changed over the years. When I was doing SportsCenter 5 nights a week, now I'm not doing that. I moved 5 years ago to LA, out of Bristol, finally escaped. No offense to Bristol, but I raised my family in Connecticut. It's a wonderful place to raise a family. But being in LA, it's great. And when the ESPN got the National Hockey League, that was a big deal. So I do a lot of stuff regarding the NHL. I used to play goalie. I was the only girl on my boys' high school team. Then I played in Oswego on the women's team, blah, blah, blah. And as you mentioned, I tried out for the Florida Panthers in a fun little bit when they were down to their emergency goalies. Everybody got hurt a number of years ago, and that was great. Going up against some NHL shooters, that was eye-opening. So anyway, long story short, but so now I also do, and this is a really big thing for me, and something I really enjoy, is that I host sports talk on SiriusXM Mad Dog Sports Radio. I fill in for Christopher Mad Dog Russo and a number of other shows on the channel. And that's great because I've always loved connecting with fans and talking primarily football. I do love the NFL. This is why I grabbed this opportunity, Jake, as well. Even though my background is hockey, I played the game. If I could play the game of the football, I would have done that too back in the day. But I love it. My dad passed the football on to me. I grew up a Giants fan. Don't get me started with the Giants right now, but I'll be happy to talk about any NFL team right now and how I feel. I tend to be a little bit controversial with my takes because they go against the grain. But that's what makes good sports talk. And that's become such a great venue over the last decade, 2 decades, really, in our broadcasting field to host sports talk. So besides doing everything you told the viewers that I do, that's like an added bonus. So I loved hosting those talk shows and connecting to the callers and hearing what they have to say. And then, blowing their brains out when I let them know what I think.
How important is that, relationship? You see all the debate shows and the talk shows today, taking calls from these fans who have these, what seem to be like outlandish takes, but, it's creating that bond, that relationship. You're talking about sports, talking about a team that they love or a player that they love. How important is that relationship to build on, a fandom or a sports team or the media world? How important is that relationship?
Yeah, I don't even think about that. I just think about we're one and the same. I mean, that's one of the reasons for my longevity. And I not only I know it, people have told me that. The way that I've connected with the fan, whether it as a SportsCenter host or whether, doing sports talk now on SiriusXM, because sports fans are the greatest. They're not fake. It's not like being being a newscaster and you're reading a prompter or you're reading what you wrote and it's about news and it's about usually fact. But with sports, you can't fool a sports fan. They know if you don't know what you're talking about. They know if you're a fraud. And so I don't look at it as like building a relationship. I just am being myself because they have sense. And those are the things when I've come into, I meet fans all the time. I meet viewers all the time, all of that. And they'll come up to me and they'll be like, and I'll stand there and have a lovely conversation about a team, a sport, a player, and just like I would be on the air. And I think it comes naturally for me because, I'll tell you, the reason why it comes naturally for me is the fact that back in the day, I had to prove myself, right? I had to prove myself being a woman in a man's world that I knew what I was talking about. So I was very anxious to engage in conversation because I wanted to show that person, usually that guy, that I knew what I was talking about. And, and so that's what I mean when it comes naturally. It was just something early on where I always felt I had to prove to people that, yeah, I actually really love sports. It's not an act. I actually really love sports.
Yeah. And I think that passion, no matter what you're doing, we obviously look at sports and there's a lot of people in this world who have a passion for sports. And if you have a passion for something you're good at in school, there's a really good chance that you're going to be able to combine both of those and have a career in sports. And one thing I want to, touch on is you mentioned you're a big Giants fan. And obviously, growing up a sports fan, having your teams, how hard is it to stay unbiased when you get into that chair, you're hosting that show and your team does something great or something terrible? How hard is it to stay biased amongst amongst the entire league, amongst all the teams when you're reporting daily on a national landscape.
Yeah, it helps that I like in those kind of roles. I'm anchor where I anchor SportsCenter. I'm doing highlights, right? I'm not with the team, right? I'm not the beat reporter. If I was the Giants beat reporter or, the sideline reporter for every Giants game, I'd have to watch what I'd say. But when I'm, in SportsCenter over the years, they've allowed us in small doses to share our opinion and let our fandom come out. And for me, it's kind of funny because I usually go the other way. I'm usually critical, and people actually who don't know me don't even know I'm a Giants fan or other teams that I rip that are my teams that I love. It's like a love dislike because I see what's going on. I'm like, I was very outspoken against my guy, Eli Manning, being pushed out by the previous management and coaching staff of the New York Football Giants. I'll never forget that. I'm a Scorpio. I'm loyal to my people. And Eli Manning was my guy, and he better be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He deserves to be. That's all I'm going to say on that. But, and I knew Daniel Jones. He's a nice guy, but he wasn't a first round pick, and he's not a franchise quarterback. And I hope they don't move on with him, but he's a nice guy and he's doing his best, but he doesn't have all the tools in the toolbox. Okay. He needs a lot of help. He's just one of those guys. It's not on him. He was put in an awful position. So that's how I feel about my Giants. I love the head coach, Brian Daboll. They're going to move in a wonderful direction with him. Could not be happier. They finally got that right. So, once true blue, always true blue. That's how I am. I'm loyal to my teams. So you have to kind of balance that. But on Sports Talk, I kind of go to more extreme measures and I'll really rip things, right? Because I have more of a freedom to do that when you're on Sports Talk Radio or when you have your own show on YouTube or when you're on TikTok, right? Or when you're, on Instagram, whatever you want to do. And that's key too and that's another message. You can get you don't have to have a job, as a sports talk show host. You can create it. You can get your opinions out there. I mean, my son does this all the time. My son is, you think I love the NFL. I brought him up right. I mean, that's his sport, right? That he's a Patriots fan. So, I texted him this morning and I'm like, where is the blame on Bill Belichick for hiring these two buffoons that only know, defense? Poor Mac Jones. Can you get him someone like an offensive coordinator to help him to move from the first year, which you were an all-pro, to a second-year development? I mean, that poor guy had to speak out, had to yell. It was good to see him be animated. He was reaching for help. But, Bill Belichick gets a pass. It's just unbelievable what's going on. You see what I mean? How I let out my opinions?
What I got from that, though, I think it's important and this can go for any profession, but specifically the profession you have, it's important to be real and be honest, and be upfront. So, when you're looking at careers, in your field and any field, how important is it to be upfront, to ask questions, to be honest? And how is that going to lead to success down the road, whether it's in your own career, in a project? How important is that role play in a career, no matter where it's at?
Yeah, that's the message. I was just telling my son my son Dan, that message a few weeks ago. It's okay if you don't know the task at hand. It's okay if it doesn't come as naturally as some of your colleagues might be pulling it off. If that's the case, you must ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, it doesn't make you look dumb. If you don't ask questions, say, oh yeah, okay, I'll be right on it. It makes you look like you're lazy. Think about it, because then you're not doing the task correctly. You're almost like saying, oh yeah, I got this. Thanks for letting me know. And you don't have this. You don't know how to do it. And it looks like your work ethic is poor. When you ask questions and say, you know what, help me to understand, right? Help me to understand, should I be doing this at this time? Or if you were me, what would make you happy, right? In this task that I'm about to do. There are ways you can ask the question. It doesn't make you feel like, oh, I don't belong, and you should not have self-doubt. When you ask questions, it only helps yourself. When you don't ask questions, it will backfire on you, and the wrong message will come out. It'll be a message of like, you don't care.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back, looking at your career, was, growing up in sports, was the media world always something you want to get into? Or was that just something that as you kind of got further in your career that you kind of saw that was your niche? So was there something you had the dream of being growing up? And was it that media world?
Well, since I couldn't be a National Hockey League goaltender, I said this would be the closest I could get to getting that same kind of adrenaline rush, the excitement of being in arenas, being in stadiums, and being part of the broadcast field. I also, I was a kid with low self-esteem growing up, and little by little, every year when I started to gain confidence in myself, I wanted to be heard. Remember, because when I was younger, I didn't want to be heard. I was like one of these people that just kind of melted into the wall. And here was an opportunity where I could speak. And so broadcast media was something I always wanted to get into. I began in radio, but I'm like, oh, radio's great, but I want to see before I hang it up if I can do this TV thing. And that worked out. And you can't get discouraged by people who think, oh, no, you should stick to radio, or, oh, no, you don't have the look, or, oh, no, I don't like your voice, or, oh, there were times, and I wrote about this in my book called Cohn, a no holds barred account of breaking into the boys club. I wrote that book in 2008, a funny look at my journey. You can get it for like $2 on Amazon right now. But anyway, I talked about how, 2 years into my ESPN run, I was almost let go. I was fired. I almost fired. I had no feedback the first 2 years. My bosses called me into the office and said, we expected you to do better. We see how much you know sports. You talk to your colleagues, you talk to us. You can't stop talking about it, but we want to see more of that animation and personality out on the screen. And I felt, well, I thought I was supposed to be reserved, because early on, back in the day when I started in 92, it wasn't like everybody out there, type of thing. A lot different going on in broadcast media, in sports media back in the early 90s. All I wanted was some feedback. They finally gave it to me. And obviously I honed my skills, and within a few months, they extended my contract. And it was like, that was ancient history, but it took some feedback. And that's another lesson. If you're, once you reach, whether it's even if you're still in college, when you don't know where you stand, and even after when you graduate, ask, say, hey, what could I be doing better? What do you like that I'm doing? What can where do I need to put more work into? Because no one told me anything, and it was like, what? So you have to be proactive, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's important too. And that opens the door for what's a lot of people, that constructive criticism might be coming. So when you take that step, I think you got to be ready that there might be some words that come back that you don't like. But at the end of the day, that's truly what's going to make you the best possible, insert your job title that you can be. Finally got some questions rolling in from our students. So students, again, I know nobody likes to be the first student to ask a question. So we thank Mark here. We're going to get to his question here in a second. But get him in. Start rolling them in. We're looking forward to seeing some of your questions. So with that, we're going to start with Mark. Mark is a student. I got to scroll back up here to specify. He is a student from Washington State University, Tri-Cities, and he wants to know, how does somebody who hasn't played sports but loves the sports break into a job in that career field, whether it's a team or in sports media?
That doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you ever picked up a football, a baseball, shot a hockey puck, or shoot basketball. It doesn't matter. It's your knowledge that matters. It's your work ethic that matters. And what do? We have so many great things, right? Like LinkedIn. What are some of these other job search things? I forgot already, but they're all over the place. And it's about you creating, showing off your knowledge in some way. If you want to be behind the scenes in public relations or communications or, management or ticket sales, there are ways to do that. But if you want to be on camera or show off your voice, look at all the ways you can do that. And you get it out there, and you have to use social media to your benefit. And this is what you do. And you find out who are the decision makers for these teams, meaning who is hiring. And you look on LinkedIn and you search your favorite team or search teams across the country that, like I told you earlier, okay, where do I see myself living? I don't want to hang around here where I graduated college. Maybe I want to move somewhere. You search there, and maybe you start small. Maybe you're from Washington, the Tri-Cities. Maybe you go to the Midwest. Maybe it goes, somewhere else where you can build up. So these tools, the LinkedIn, these kind of things, that's what I would do. I would be searching, and see the command of what job titles, who's in charge of hiring. And then I would get my material, exhaust it, And don't just pick 3 places. I mean, you got to work at getting a job. It takes hard work. So that's what I would do. I mean, back in the day, I mentioned my first big TV job, my first event was Seattle, Washington. Okay. And I actually visited Seattle for the first time a year before I was hired to hand deliver. And, that time there was no social media. So keep that in mind, but hand deliver what I could do, the videotapes of my work, and meet with actual human beings in hiring positions. And I called in advance and I said, hey, I'm in town, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I was working on a bunch of radio stations at the time. I wasn't straight out of college, but I still had never done real TV. And, they gave me 10 minutes of their time. And even if it's just a phone call or an email at this point, that'll be worth it. So you just have to go outside the box, and don't worry if you've never played a sport.
To kind of talk along the same lines there, we got a question that came in here from Ruben, and the questions are rolling in. So we're going to keep rolling with these two.
Yeah, do it.
He attends St. Anselm University, and he wants to know, breaking into the industry with minimal experience or internships. He said looking through those jobs, everything says requires 1 to 2 years plus of experience. So with somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, how do you stand out in the job that requires a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, this is tough. I mean, get ready to make no money, right? Early on, if you really want to be in the sports field. Seriously, it's not a joke. And I see you're nodding, so you understand. This is the bottom line. You have to volunteer. I told you back in the day, I volunteered to cover the New York Islanders. I forgot the caveat of that. I hated the Islanders growing up. I was a big Rangers fan. Okay. And anyone who knows New York knows those 2 teams couldn't stand each other. And it was worse back in the day. It wasn't lovey-dovey as it is now with mutual respect for everybody. So that was painful. So I had to do that. But getting back to this, it's almost like, you have your other job to, I got to pay the bills once you graduate. But if I could volunteer and get in the door at working for one of these teams in any capacity, maybe you want to be in PR, but you have to go to ticket sales and be at the bottom rung. But now you got something to put on your resume. So that's what these these teams that say, oh, you're going to need a year or 2 years experience. Of course, they're going to put that up there, but you're going to have to find a way to get around that and at least get your foot in the door. But you need something, anything. And by the way, if it shows that you have volunteered to do this to get something on the resume, well, that future employer will be impressed by that.
Yeah, and I think that's too. We always say, especially me, when someone comes in for a full-time job or an internship, I'm skipping all the school and I'm going right to your related experience. And
yeah.
Did you like you said, did you volunteer at camps on the weekend? Did you play a collegiate sport? Did you do A, B, C, and D and load your schedule up because you knew you needed experience? And that sometimes, even if it's not the best related experience, the fact that you put the time in shows that you have the want to get that job and, find that job that you want the most. And like you said, as long as you go out and do it, that's a huge piece. Kind of along the same lines about getting out there and trying to get experience. Hunter, who goes to Radford University, wants to know, how did you make your first connection? So looking at networking, to allow you to get where you are today, and what would your advice be for those students now looking to make their first connection?
Yeah, again, back in the day, I hate to be repetitive, but there was no social media or LinkedIn or anything like that. And so when I volunteered to cover the New York Islanders, the biggest networking situation that I accomplished was just, I put myself in that position where others would see me. And one of my mentors was a guy by the name of Ed Ingalls, who was a sports director for many years at a New York City all news radio station called WCBS Radio. And this was a few years before sports talk radio came into play. So WCBS AM radio was the place where you got sports, when you want to know who won. I know this sounds like prehistoric for the young people right now, but this is the way it was. It was tough. So anyway, Ed Ingalls saw how I handled myself in locker rooms, saw how I knew what I was talking about, saw how professional I was, saw how my passion. And he hired me to freelance. Like, hey, okay, hockey. I mean, you want to cover US Open tennis? You want to cover some Met games for me? You want to, cover a Yankee game for me when I need you? I go, sure. And that was my first big networking connection, but I only got it. He would never know I existed if I did not volunteer to cover the New York Islanders on my own, make no money, okay, and cover the New York Islanders. And he didn't even hear my reports for this Long Island radio station that I was working at. It was because I was out there at the game and conducting myself in a professional manner. There are ways now where, you can have your own YouTube channel, right? You can have a platform where you can get a media pass for, a regular season game of a whatever, I forgot where you were from, but, an NBA game or something, they'll give out those media passes where you go. That's what, if you can somehow, even if it's for one game, get a platform that you create, and then you have your media pass and you get through PR of your favorite team or any team, wherever in your town, could be a college team, for goodness sake, whatever, not your college, but another, a bigger, whatever it is, what I'm saying, where it gets attention, then that's how you connect to people in the business. And that to me is something you can really take advantage of.
Awesome. Yeah. It's all about putting yourself out there. And I know it's a scary world to do so. If you've seen this program before, any of the viewers, I always say I was that kid. I didn't want to interrupt anybody's day. I didn't want to go outside of my comfort zone. And, looking back, if that would have happened, who knows what my career would have looked like. But it's all about taking that step. And once you take it once, it's a little easier to take it the second time. And once you do it the second time, so on and so forth, you start becoming and growing. And, you mentioned, having that YouTube channel. I think that's, whether it's social media or YouTube or whatever it might be, you're going to have those pages and you're going to be putting out videos that get 3 views, 6 views. And it's going to hurt a little bit, to be honest with you, but it's all about building, and you're creating a resume, you're creating a portfolio, and you don't even know. So,
yeah, it's not about views and likes. I hate to break it to you. It's not about views and likes, not when you're trying to get a job. Okay. It's showing to the your future employer that, hey, I know how the world of social media works. They don't know who I am, but that didn't stop me. That didn't stop me from creating this stage for myself. And I think that goes a long way with a future employer. Absolutely.
Especially in today's world. Got another question here. This is from Brian. Brian watches a bunch of these programs. So Brian, thanks for tuning in again. He attends the University of Illinois. He said, nice. What do you think is the biggest challenge in preparing for your programs? And how is that related to other departments, whether it be at ESPN or SiriusXM?
Yeah, good question. I think it's all different. When I prepare to, solo a 3-hour sports talk show on SiriusXM, I am like all locked in. I'm all NFL with these shows because that's what I speak freely. I know that song and verse, obviously hockey, but it's not as big as the NFL. Nothing is as big as the NFL. And that is, it's a magnet for callers and my key. So I have to and want to be song and verse. I have to know of every, contending team. Am I going to, care as much for, I'm just naming an awful team. I'm not even, no, because on any given Sunday, as you know, anybody could beat anybody. So I don't think there are no awful teams in the NFL. Even the Texans are not awful. And who knows, they really might beat the Cleveland Browns this week. Shocker. I don't know, but we won't get into that subject, even though I brought it up. But I'll prepare more for something like that. I'll also prepare a hell of a lot if I'm between the benches or I'm a sideline reporter, ice level reporter during an NHL game, because I have to have some, stories I have to share when called upon. I also, when I'm interviewing players and interviewing coaches behind the bench, you don't want to look like an idiot. So you have to really know each team, thoroughly. So I spend, a lot more time on that. But if I'm hosting SportsCenter or if I'm hosting In the Crease on ESPN Plus, those are specifically more highlight driven shows. So you can just kind of get away with your, what at the time. Are you reacting to the highlight? That which has always been my strength is like reacting to the highlight as I'm saying the highlight, just showing, kind of being a little sarcastic, but also sharing the information. So it really just all depends. And it just compares also the personality. Who knows how long Stephen A. Smith takes to prepare for First Take? I don't think it takes him that long because, he's called upon for all of ESPN shows to have input. So I just think, at this time of his career already, it's like it's just go. I don't know. The guy never sleeps, but it's just automatic. So I think it depends on the person, and the show.
Awesome. Our next question here comes from Minnie, who's a student at San Diego State University. They want to pursue a career in data analytics, and we know how prevalent that is in so many different career paths nowadays, specifically in the NFL industry, and wanted to know how is the culture when it comes to being a female in sports? You know, you've obviously seen a lot of different points throughout about history and all ends of the spectrum. So can you touch on that a little bit, you know, being that female, you know, in a male dominated industry?
Yeah. First of all, if you're a female and you know data analytics, I mean, that's a golden path for you. Seriously, because it just seems like to me, there are a lot more men in that field. So I really feel that's something you should push in your knowledge, and that's not going away. Analytics, because that has a lot to do with, I know it's a poo-poo word, but to bring up betting. I mean, analytics and betting, and this is where the world we live in sports right now. And both those areas are not going away, especially the analytics, of course, right? Because coaches depend on it. We see all these young coaches and even middle-aged coaches who, you know, as fans, we've had to get used to these decisions. And I speak for myself regarding, are you really going for two now? You know, that kind of thing. Or what are you doing? Why don't you just take this game into overtime and, you know, believe in your team that they can win the game instead of, you know, but what do I know? So analytics are not going anywhere. I think that's such a great field, and especially in the NFL. I would exhaust that in every way, because again, you just want to find a way, an avenue to get through that door, right? Even if analytics is not your first love or you don't have super knowledge on it, and everything else, every other path has been closed for you, well, try that path. Who said you have to only take one path to get to the, you know, the end of the road where the jackpot is? And I don't mean that money, I mean that happiness, you know, career happiness. There are several different roads you can take. So don't count on anything. Just get that foot in the door.
Absolutely. I think that's, you know, always professors talk about it, teachers talk about it, and it's hounded. I'm seeing, you know, it was I was in college, but you know, it's true. And I can speak on it. You can speak on it. And I'm sure there are thousands and thousands of other people that can speak on it. And it's just one of those things that you have to do. Got another question here. This is from Giovanni. He's a student at Boston College. I wanted to know, did you consider being a color or play-by-play commentator before sports talk? And for those of you that don't know, can you talk about what the difference is? Because, you know, to the average sport fan, you see people on TV, two people are talking. They're just talking about the game, the match, whatever it might be. And Giovanni also wanted me to say, go Rangers.
Ah, nice. Giovanni in Boston College, but a Rangers fan, very difficult, especially this year with the Bruins being so good and the Rangers being mediocre right now. But things can change. It's a long season. All right. A couple of things. Did I ever want to do play-by-play or color analyst? Well, I felt my real strength was in, you know, anchoring and SportsCenter and highlights and, you know, the way I deliver a highlight and showing off my passion there. You know, you can be more animated now, at least, and you're not with just one sport, right? Type of thing. But that's not the reason why I didn't go into play-by-play. Back in the day, in the mid to late 90s, the boss at ESPN at that time thought I'd be great at doing some play-by-play of LPGA golf. Now, to me, I don't know. When I look back on it, I thought he was trying to destroy my career, because it's not like I love golf. I had no passion for golf. I didn't show that. I played golf. And then later on in my life, I really got into it. That was a real big learning experience for me. Maybe he was trying to have me branch out, which is kind of good. That's probably what it was. Let's take that back, Jake. I think I'm better, not bitter, as I say. You know, he was trying to, instead of putting me on things that I really love, like the NFL at that time, he put me on LPGA golf. Well, guess what? It was eye-opening for me, because those women were amazing. They played the game, but I learned that, you know, my SportsCenter tone did not work when you're doing play-by-play in golf. You have to be very quiet. You have to really know the terminology. You can't screw up. I mean, not that I screwed up a lot at SportsCenter. I barely did. But when you're doing play-by-play golf, everyone's so sensitive. So that was eye-opening, and it was probably a great learning experience for me. The other time I was given play-by-play, which was a great experience for me. Again, not showing that I wanted this in particular, but I did play-by-play for NCAA tournament women's games early on, and then I did some WNBA games. And again, I really gained a super appreciation for, even though I played hockey with women in college at Oswego State, to see, in a higher level, team sports, women's sports, and calling games. It was that I prepared for a WNBA game or any basketball game. You should see me. I mean, it took me forever to write my board. I mean, it took me like 2 days to prepare. I was like, I can't screw anything up. I can't screw a name up. I got So that was really stressful for me. It wasn't a natural thing for me, right? So that's when I just said, you know what, play-by-play is not for me. I could see me being an analyst though, because I have opinions on everything, and I could see what's going on, and I can have something to say on it. And I especially I could do that with hockey. But that's probably the only sport where I can do analysis. It's hard to be in the booth, people. It really is. You better be, if you want that, you better be willing to start in cities that you never heard of, towns, I should say, they're not cities, to doing really super minor league stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but even before that, you have to like practice in front of a mirror, repetition, just hear yourself, do it into your iPhone, all these kind of things. It is really, really hard to do play-by-play.
One of our favorite questions we like to ask during this program is, just to get, because working in sports opens the doors to be a part of a lot of very cool events or be at a certain game. So you've been in the sports world for a long time, but if you could pick one event, one moment throughout your career, when you're retired, done on TV, you're at home talking to your grandchildren, and they ask, what was your favorite moment? What would your favorite moment from your career be?
There are so many, but my favorite moments were the ones I wasn't working at. And I made that sound crazy, but my favorite games that I was in attendance for were Eli Manning's 2 Super Bowl wins over the Patriots. I was there as a fan. Okay. The first time I was there with my brother, barely could get a ticket. Glendale, Arizona was where the Super Bowl was. We just got to Arizona and, rolled the dice, got tickets. We're there as fans. We saw the amazing helmet catch. We saw Eli's escape. We saw the amazing upset, sending the Patriots to their first loss. And then I went with my son. We didn't know we were going to Indianapolis to see the Giants play the Patriots because they played in that, I don't know if they were in Lucas Oil yet, but they might've been in, who knows, might've been the RCA Dome at that time. I don't even know, but we were in Indy and my son could not believe it because he was convinced no way the Patriots were going to let Eli Manning and the Giants do it again, but they did. And fun story, after Eli with his amazing throw to Mario Manningham and the sideline, the whole thing, and they won and great. The confetti comes down. My son, who at the time was 16, gets up from his, we were in the back. We were like on the ceiling. That was all we could get in, gets up and he's walking down. I'm like, where are you going? I got to see the Super Bowl celebration here. He's like, Mom, I can't watch this. And I'm like, oh my God. So I miss that because as a mom, of course I got up and followed him. I wasn't going to let him wander out of this stadium with 1 million people. So side note, I miss that. But, those were 2 of the 3 greatest events I've been at. The other one, of course, was, again, not working at it, just cashed in on a favor. Game 7, Rangers winning the Stanley Cup at Madison Square Garden. And I was in the building for that. And I was able to call my dad, who was in Florida at the time. And thank God he was still alive to see that because he never thought he'd see the Rangers in his lifetime win a Stanley Cup. Did. And I never thought I'd see that. And it was just amazing. So those are the 3 greatest sporting events that I've been at. And they were great because they were my teams and I wasn't working. I was there as a fan, and that would be the way I would want it.
Awesome. And this is something that I like, because, we do our research when we interview folks for Before the Snap, or whether it be a Hall of Famer for our Heart of a Hall of Famer series connected by Extreme Networks. You mentioned, having to do your research, all the preparation. What would be your most out of left field story that you ever found in your career when they send it down to you on the ice and you're telling a story about one of the players what's that most out of left field crazy story that you were able to dig up and find on somebody?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love the stories that involve inspiration, coming back from severe injury or coming back from hearing everyone and their grandmother tell you couldn't do something. Those are the kind of stories I love. There's just so many of those in sports. Doesn't matter what sport it is. Those are the kind that I love sharing to people, and especially people, I love sharing those stories. I tell people, like some of my friends who aren't into sports, and I'll say, you know what I did yesterday? I talked about whatever. I'm just whoever I'm naming or whatever. But I share that kind of story and they're like, wow, I didn't realize that, because people who don't really are engaged in sports, they need to know all these other amazing good stories. They only see the headlines and the clickbait of the awful stuff, right? Former players doing this, blah, 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 They need to know of the players playing right now, all the good they're doing. And those are the kind of stories that I love doing and sharing. And I really appreciated the role of reporter, which I haven't done as much, obviously, in my career. And now I get it. Now I get why people kind of want to be either the sideline reporter or just, other kinds of reporters, so they can share these great stories.
Along those same lines, here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we know that there's so many other sports and activities and the things that people like to do that can teach you these life lessons, but we're obviously unapologetically football. We're going to talk about the game of football. And in your career, how have you seen the importance of the game of football be? What are those life lessons that the game of football teaches, not only those who play it at any age, but those who are involved in the game, those who are in the media, those who are just fans watching on TV? What are those life lessons you've seen the game of football teach?
Yeah, well, you guys nail it at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Okay, you get it right. And by the way, what an amazing ceremony each and every year. If there's ever an example, okay, of how significant the Pro Football Hall of Fame, let's just talk about that first before the game. Pro Football Hall of Fame is just looking into the eyes of every member of the Hall of Fame and those during the induction ceremony and their speeches and how important their speeches are and the words they say during that time up on stage, wearing that jacket, seeing their gold bust over there, and what it means to them. To me, I've watched this ceremony every year for decades, and that's what I see. And that is a reflection of what the Pro Football Hall of Fame is about. And that is why, even though in football, players don't care about individual honors, right? They don't care about their stats or anything until after they retire. And then they'll look back and they're like, oh yeah, it was pretty good. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I do want to get into that Hall of Fame, right? Type of thing. But I just love, not all sports, right? Think about it. I don't think there's not another sport, major sport, where the Hall of Fame ceremony means so much to these guys. I don't know. I mean, I love hockey and they do a good job, but there's something about Canton, Ohio that speaks volumes. And again, all I have to do is look in the eyes of these players when they're up on stage talking about their stories, right? Gets back to their stories and who inspired them, whether it's family or coaches or friends or what obstacles they overcome. You want to be inspired, you watch that every year. And again, it's such a great game, and the game has evolved and the game has gone through changes. And there are some things that fans don't like. Oh, this is not football anymore. Guess what? You're still watching, and you're watching more than you've ever watched before, and there are different arms to popularity and females. Okay. I mean, I think it's just as many female fans as male fans for whatever reason. The greatness of the game, the players, their personalities, of course, fantasy football, which is just the fun aspect of it. I was old school. Quick story. I was old school when fantasy, I'm old enough to know when fantasy football started and the Red Zone channel. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me I would want at that time, Tony Romo on my fantasy team. I'm a Giants fan. You're telling me I'm going to put, Brian Dawkins on the, whatever it is, whoever the hell, anybody from the NFC East that doesn't wear Giants,
whatever
Giants,
it is.
Yeah. I'm like, what are you talking about? But now it's like we wouldn't have it any other way. This is great. And it gets everyone more engaged. And by the way, now football fans are it's not only about their team, right? They are so knowledgeable about other teams in the league, other players in the league, because of fantasy football, because of analytics, right? And because of sports talk and how big the media has grown. So media has grown along with the NFL. But getting back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, it all starts there. It's just the reflection of the game and the guys that have gone through there and what it means to them.
Awesome. We got a couple minutes here. One pretty fun activity we started this year. We got some rapid fire questions we want to ask. And after done with that, we'll try and sum anything up. So rapid fire questions. You ready?
Yep.
All right. LinkedIn, great way to network or just another social media app?
Great. Absolutely.
GPA on a resume, put it on or leave it off?
Oh, God, mine stunk. I mean, early on, but it climbed up. I was on academic probation, 1.8. Then I finished with a 3.2 grade point average. So depends.
Social media accounts, public or private?
Public.
Jeans at work, all day, every day, never, or only on Fridays?
You could do Fridays. Fridays are fun days.
Coin toss, heads or tails?
Wow. In tennis, it's up or down, and I'm always up. So I'll go heads.
And then last one, you score a touchdown. What's your go-to touchdown celebration?
Just like yes. I'm more like the Eli Manning, the quarterback kind of celebration of like watching my teammates make me look better.
I like that's a good, never had that one before. I like that. So thank you for that. Last question here today. And this is how we wrap up every program. Just because there's been so many good pieces of advice, little nuggets of information. If there's one thing you want everybody who watches this, whether it's live right now, whether it's 6, 9, 12 months from now, what is that one piece of advice, if there's only one thing they could remember to take away from today?
Yeah, I mean, I know this has been said, and I think the greatest Martin Luther King Jr. said it, is like, you have to take that first step. You never know where that staircase will lead you unless you take that first step. So that's what you have to do. Take the first step. You just never know where it's going to lead. And what's the worst that can happen, right? That's the thing. My own dad told me that. What's the worst that can happen? Just follow your passion. I know I have not said that perfectly, but I think I said it better in this previous 45 minutes that we spoke. Don't let anyone stop you. Don't let anything stop you, okay? Because you don't want to look back and say you didn't try.
Absolutely. All right. With that, we're going to wrap up this latest installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Before the Snap series today, featuring the great Ms. Linda Cohn, anchor, do it all at ESPN. Linda, thank you so much for being part of the program today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Good luck, everyone.
Yep. Before we leave today, as always, make sure you're following along with everything we do here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We just announced our semifinalists that are going to be whittled down to select our new class coming up here in February, which I can't believe is only a couple months away when the Super Bowl is played. So stay tuned for that. Like, follow, subscribe. If you're a podcast listener, make sure you subscribe to our podcast, The Mission, hosted by our great friend here, Jameer Howerton, a co-worker and friend of ours. A lot of great interviews coming up on that. And we're also plugging, ESPN, the SportsCenter. Make sure you're following along. Make sure you're hitting up, getting that ESPN Plus subscription, and watching the In the Crease, learning about hockey as it gains popularity every week that we're seeing. I'm seeing it more and more on TV when I'm scrolling through and seeing all the great things on there. So again, as you know, we call this program Before the Snap because we want to focus on everything that takes place ahead of before the snap happens, so the game can kick off and all the great things that go into that. So again, Linda, thank you for everything you've done for the game of football, truly everything you've done for sports, the field of sport, in your time here in the media world, and truly thanks indirectly everything you do for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, thanks so much. And when Eli gets in, can you save me a seat? I'm going to go to Canton.
We'll have a seat safe here for sure. So from myself, from Linda, all of us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, thank you so much for tuning in today, students. Next Friday, we'll be live again. We're going to have Monterey Carter of the Minnesota Vikings. She works with their Vikings Foundation, so learning about all the great things they're doing in the community up there in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So again, thanks for tuning in today. So from myself, Linda,